All right, good morning. Today I have with me Van, my co-host. We're going to discuss an interesting topic. We're going to go over which is harder, what are the challenges with being a dad, so a parent, versus a husband or a spouse. So, what is harder in your opinion, and kind of what are the different challenges you see? So, what are your thoughts, Van?
Well, I thought you were just gonna say co-host, so I was gonna say hi, but yeah, let's get into it. Um, Harder. Uh, Sip of coffee first, let's see. Uh, I would say, and this is probably gonna be surface level until you get into yours. I would say it's husband. As of right now, I think I'm still experiencing it. I'm still learning what is actually harder. The thing for me, it's that makes a husband harder. It's that you choose it, and it's not something that you have to do, right? And
Correct.
as a husband or as a dad or a father, it's something obviously that you have done to have that child, right? But there's always that unconditional, I don't, I would say love and responsibility at the same time. So you always feel like you have to be there and you always have to take care of this person. And it's even easier because you have that feeling within your gut that you need to be taking care of this person. And I only have I have a 2.5 year old and a 10 month old. So 10 month old. So it's easy for me to say that because they can't actually feed themselves properly yet. And then my youngest, I mean, she can't eat real solids quite yet. Or things that she can chew because she doesn't have teeth. So it's easier for me to say that. Like if they were like a little bit older, maybe, and they're out running about and they can maybe feed themselves, maybe I'd have it differently. But it's a very easy question right now because it was my choice to have those children, and I also see as it as a responsibility that I have to kind of feed them, take care of them. It kind of reminds me when I go out and about and they're not behaving like I would want them to. And typically if it weren't my children, it's like, oh, whatever. That's not my responsibility or they can do whatever they want. But when I see when they're doing something that I don't like or that they shouldn't be doing, that I just in my mind that it's not something that I would want my kid to be doing. I have that weird, I don't know what I would call it, that feeling within my gut or wherever, it it feels like that's my fault that they're doing that. And I have to go and change that in any which way, whether it's their behavior or bring them back to me. It's like, oh, you can't be doing that. That's just almost like a reflex. So when I'm a husband, it's
So, and how long
I
so
don't know.
you're new to dadding, right? So you've been a dad for a couple years now. You still have littles. That's what any kid under five, I call them a little. How long
Yeah.
have you been married? Because we've known each other a long time, but
Oh,
like so everybody else
you're
knows
you're gonna
how
test me in
long.
the morning. Uh,
Just ballpark
uh
it. I'm not asking you for an
4
exact
years.
date.
4 years.
So 4 years married, 2 years with kids. Uh, so yeah, kind of get into and yours is a you know not traditional, but like you had to jump through some hoops a little bit to even get your wife here because for me, like me and my wife, like I met her, she lived very close by, very easy for me, where you and your wife were half a world apart for when you kind of first started dating and then you got married, and you had a lot of hoops to jump through, so it wasn't even easy for you in the very beginning of your marriage or getting people here, and your whole situation's been, I would say, not like your marriage isn't non-traditional, but like getting just here has been non-traditional. And-
Yeah, I can go over that a little bit. I think when I came to you with this kind of topic or question, I don't really think I had that part of part of it in mind. when Ian and I met each other, we we were in Vietnam. I was on like a 3 week vacation, meeting or just visiting my grandparents. That was the reason, and it was probably 13 years since I've been back to Vietnam, and I didn't expect to meet anybody. It was really just, oh, I'm gonna go there, and I don't know how much longer my parents, or sorry, my grandparents were gonna be around. It was just like, oh, let's uh just go there and make sure that I see them for what could have been a final time, because I don't know when I would be back. It was 13 years since I've been back, so they were getting older, um, a little bit more brittle. So that was the idea. Um, my And if you're Asian, you would probably know. I don't know how it is for other people, but if you go back to Vietnam and you're not married and you're not dating anybody, typically, and your parents are there, you're typically gonna see a female. Um, so the the Ian was somebody that my parents wanted me to meet for quite some time. So I was at a point in my life where it's like there there was some resistance for sure, back when I was in school or anything like that, maybe when I was just coming out of school and started working, that I wasn't gonna be in a sort of an arranged marriage or anything like that, or um, just be set up by my parents really. So I think in that 13 years, it was kind of a little bit of that pushback. So I think in the back of my mind, I knew, just going to Vietnam, I was gonna see somebody, and I didn't know Ian at all, obviously. So when I went there, it's like, okay, we can go see her, and um, it was, I don't know if it's traditional or not, but to typically go see somebody, you typically go to their house and see them, or what actually ended up happening. We went to her house, but there was actually someone else that I met that my uncle was wanting me to see as well. And that was near my grandparents' house. So I went out to coffee with my cousin, and they um, brought the girl there. So that was very strange. So it's not traditional in any which way. But getting back to Ian, we went to her house, and that's how we met. And then um, it wasn't until I got back to the US that we started chatting more, and starting to get to know each other more, starting to like each other more. And I kind of think about those kind of times. Those were kind of times where it was a lot easier because it was straightforward. It was texting, video calls, and stuff like that. And that's what became accustomed to.
So the
And
responsibility, was it that it was easier because you could time it, or is it that after you kind of came into being more together and getting married, is it that there's that added layer of responsibility and expectation that compounds the challenge of being a
the
husband?
the challenge the challenge was, when she got to the US, it was still new. We were getting used to obviously the new situation of living together. And like you said, we had to go through green card paperwork and stuff like that. So that was another 7 months that we had to kind of sit on the sidelines and make sure that we were apart. Uh, but the hard part was in direct relation to uh, the other topic, right? So when we had kids was when it started changing. I think the part when I say it's easy, I believe fully that a relationship is built on communication. And when that communication isn't there, that's when the relationship gets that much harder. Um, so when I said it was very easy when we were apart, it was just the video calling, the texting. It was constant every single day, every single day. And if we didn't hear from each other, we would say, "Oh, what's going on?" So when we had kids, things shifted, right? We didn't have time. Uh, we didn't really put set times out to talk. Even before we had kids, we would set time before we go to sleep and we talk. Whereas now we can't as much. And we're still working through that. I think it's not exactly where it would be where we would want it to be. But it's a constant battle, right? Like there's things that I want to do, like doing this podcast, like we gotta sleep early. If you want to be having that communication, we gotta stay up later, kind of thing. So it's a constant trade-off to constantly find that time. And we have two little people that constantly pull our attention and work and like other things. So that's why I would say it's that much harder because it's kind of like the thing that you take for granted the at the beginning. It's the first thing you take for granted is what I'm trying to say. So, um, and we're still trying to build it back to what it was. I think it was very great when we were engaged and then we got married. And I think that's why uh, we got married. So we're just having kids. It was kind of like a bomb. Kind of blew everything up. And like I said, it's easy to put that time in with the kid because I know at least what kind of father I want to be, and maybe not fully, but I know I want to be spending time with them and be present with them. But I think that also has to come as a husband too. So it's harder because you have to be more cognizant of it and put that time in.
Gotcha.
Um, so I guess that is a long way of being a surface level answer.
So I think it's you brought up some like really interesting parts, and I actually when we talked about this question, I really thought about it, and I talked to my wife about it a little bit, and and we even talked about it a little bit this morning because she knew that we originally were gonna have a guest today um who's a friend of mine that you've met I think once or twice, really good guy. And she's like, well, what are you doing now? And I was like, well, we're gonna do which is harder, being a dad or being a husband. And she's like, well, which is it? And my answer that I kind of came back to is similar to yours, and like kind of having you talk through it kind of made me think of a few things. I think that if you want to be a good husband or if you want to be a good father, like they're both incredibly hard, right? Being good at something is just hard in general. I think being a crappy is easier. Um, like being a bad dad, or what I would consider a bad dad, is easy because it's the least amount of effort. Being a bad husband or mediocre husband, I think is, again, it's a medium amount of effort. But I think when you said the communication part, and I've been married, it'll be 9 years this year. Um, and I think the communication part when we did first start dating, like you're right. It's a lot of texting, it's a lot of phone calls, it's a lot of, like you write them a little poem or a little letter, or like you're making that time and you're just chatting and you're actively engaged. When you're married and living in a house with kids, it's easy to be together but disengaged. It's easy to like just to sit in the same room and watch a show together, and those things are enjoyable. I'm not saying that they're not enjoyable. Like my wife and I have specific stupid TV shows that we really enjoy, and we'll just sit next to each other, or we'll read together, sometimes not the same book, but we'll just read and be together. But there's no actual like communication going on. So I think that's actually a really great call out, that's very difficult, and neither one of us as an adult is really great on saying like, hey, I'd love to have some time to just let's just chat. Where on the flip side, again, I have older kids, so my oldest is 13, my youngest is 8. They tell me, dad, I need this time, like they'll ask me for time, and I think that's been built up for years, right? Where tell me what you need, right? And it's don't tell me what you want, it's tell me what you need. And then you tell me what you want after. Like I'm always What do you need first? What do you want later with my kids? So like my son, um, he'll tell me, hey, like I want to, he likes to cuddle still. Like he'll be like, so, and what that is he wants to like sit together and do something. Like either we're wrestling around or whatever. So he just tells me exactly what he needs, or my daughter tells me what she needs, or my littlest isn't always verbal about it. She just jumps on me and she's like, this is, and I know what she wants. Um, or as a parent or as a husband, like it's you have a different level, right? Like I don't necessarily just see my wife and go and like jump on her, so to speak, and be like, hey. She's like, what are you doing? Like, well, sometimes I do because I'm annoying, in her words, because I like physical contact. But I think that's the other piece is, I think what's really challenging is when you need something from your kids, it's very easy to just tell them, hey, this is what I need you to do. When you need something for your wife, you have to like, it's a different conversation that you have with yourself. It's like, okay, do I really need this, or like what's on their plate? Which I think makes it harder. So because sometimes just like, okay, I don't need that right now, or I don't need that time, or um you, much like myself, you work from home. Ian works from home. My wife works from home. So you technically don't ever get to be alone. And I don't know if that's something that you personally enjoy. It's just like having alone time. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, yeah, we work from home. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of time to be alone. I think the work hours are typically that. Um,
Right? But then you get to deal
yeah.
with me
Uh,
sometimes.
yeah, there's definitely times I think about being alone, and that's something else that I've thought of and as a different topic. Like for me and most people will call me an introvert. Um, I think there are times where I get recharged when I'm alone, and there's also times where I get recharged with people. And it's probably been, I can't remember a very extended amount of time where I've been alone in the past 3 years. So I definitely think about that because it was a normal thing for me before I got married or even had kids. I think having kids it made it obviously even harder because it's hard for me to leave Ian at home with two kids, right? Especially when we had our second. So, I mean, because I always think of about the numbers game. It's like it's one against two,
Hmm.
or I'm always I would be in there to even the odds out. So if I read to the grocery store or something like that, I would always bring my oldest with me typically. So there won't be as much on Ian's plate when if I ever do run out somewhere. And it's been different since the grandparents have come back, where I can leave and not feel too bad about it. But yeah, there's definitely times where I drive past with the family in a bar that I've typically gone to, and it's like, oh, that there was a time where I would want to go in there right now. There's probably a moment during the day where I would want to go in there too, but so yeah, there's definitely times where I think about that.
Gotcha. So kind of as and again, this is, I think about it a little bit deeper.
I don't think you answered the question though. Which one is harder?
I think that for me personally, I think being a good husband has more challenges right now. I think being a good dad is also challenging, but in a different way. But with my children, with my kids, um, I have put a lot of time in, and they're easy because I know what they want. Like generally, and there's a disagreement, so like, and you and I eventually will have a podcast on this. Like the topic of dating comes up quite a bit in my house, from you know, like one, because I think it's funny to like give my kids a hard time about it because I tell them they're not allowed to date till they're 40. And you know, my oldest isn't interested, my middle is kind of interested, and my little is, you know, she has crushes sometimes, which I just tell her is not allowed. But I
Sorry.
could just
Again, the middle one is what, 11?
11, yeah.
11. Okay.
But it's just real easy. It's a no. Like with kids, what makes it easier is like if I don't like what they're doing, the answer is no. And sometimes, well, why is the answer no, Dad? Because I don't want you to, is an acceptable answer. Um, that does not work with a spouse. You can't just tell your wife no. Like, yeah, there's generally a conversation. I mean, you can on some things, right? Like, obviously, like you've already set predetermined boundaries and stuff. But I think that that's what makes it harder, and it's you're always willing to sacrifice for your kids, so you're willing to sacrifice time with your spouse for your kids. Or, and again, I have a split family, so I don't get my two oldest all the time, so it's a different dynamic. And um I never worry. I'm not really a jealous person. But I think that they're always in the back of your head is concern sometimes of like, you know, with your spouse of, you know, like I'm jealous when I don't get to be just with her. I'm not jealous of other people, but like when it's like, oh man, like she's going to do something fun and I'm not there. Like she got to go to like a cool work dinner at like a really nice steak place and have adult conversations, right? Like it's like this, like it's a bunch of director level people and they're having these adult conversations about like how do I be a better leader? And I'm like, I'm jealous of this, not because, you know, I'm jealous of my wife, but like she gets to have these cool adult conversations on how do you be better. And I don't get those at my level, well, especially with our company. Like they're not interested in us being leaders at our level. Um, so I get jealous of that kind of stuff where my kid goes to a wrestling tournament. And am I jealous of him being athletic? Yes. Am I jealous of some kid like him, like it wrapped in actual combat where I'm like, oh man, that looks like I would hurt so bad the next day. So there's like even like a not necessarily a jealousy thing in a traditional like, oh, like you don't get time, but like she gets to do cool stuff that I don't, and we can't go together because we have kids. Or, you know, she gets to work on cool things or learn new things, and it's different. And again, it comes back to that there's responsibilities where if you want to make a big change with your kids, like, hey, I'm gonna open a business. Your kid's like, oh, that's awesome, let's do this. How can I help? Can I do this for you? With your spouse, it's okay, like this is going to cost money, like this is going to add additional stress, like we have to have those conversations. If you fail, like that's on you. If you're successful, you know, there's just the expectations are so different. Being a good dad is, you know, again, I think it's three things to be a good dad. You show up consistently, you know, you show up like, and again, we've talked about, you know, show up however. You have to default to no, as in you want to know what's up, you know, with your kids, and then you have to be consistent with the first two. And you do need to do that as a husband, but there's just so much more to being a good husband. And then there's other dynamics of what example did you have of being a good husband of when you were a kid? I didn't have one. So it took me you know, like obviously like I was married and divorced, and then I was not a great husband there. And how do I be a good husband here, or a great husband? I think the difference between being a good husband and a great husband is tenfold. And then if you want to be exceptional, I don't even know how to be exceptional if we're being honest. Like, you know, how do you become a, you know, super wealthy so your wife doesn't have to work if she doesn't want to work, but yet you have enough time to spend with your kids. So how do you work 40 hours a week and make $1 million a year? I haven't figured that out yet. Maybe it's the podcast fan.
I think I think if it was out there, I mean, people would be doing it.
Yeah.
I think one of our podcasts that defaulting to no has uh I don't, yeah, it's sort of stuck to me. I've been thinking about it, and I don't know if actually really thought about it with my kids. I've actually thought about it more when I talked
With
to
your
Ian.
wife.
Yeah, I mean, she asked me. She asked me for something, and she was looking for a yes or no, and it was that thought that came to mind. It's like I'm not saying no, but I want to
I
know
want to
more.
know. Yeah.
Like, why do you want that? And then we can work from there. But she let me know about something and she needed to know an answer in an hour. It's like, I don't know what we can do. And in the middle of that, we were already we were already in like the middle of an argument from last night. So um didn't work out. Um so I guess I'm not sure how much time we have left, but depends on how deep you want to get into this. But I think we're both in agreement that a husband is harder. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of similar things that we can take from being a good dad with being a good husband. And the things that I'm hearing from you, it's it, it's more like you're like an authority figure for your children versus
Correct.
an equal partner with your spouse. So I think that's where the
It's like
main thing
equal.
thing is.
She's
Right.
like right here, and
So I guess I'm curious to hear from you what you've learned because it's been a constant learning experience when things started to shift. For me, where when we started having kids and it was kind of what's the quickest way to know what's going on? Because for me, that constant communication part, for me, it's the understanding part. Where I think we've talked about this, and this is where I was venting to you. Uh, when we were having our Ian and I, she likes physical contact, and this was something that was opposite for you and Darla. She likes physical contact for her to even calm down whatsoever.
Mhm.
But me, I don't. When I when I'm uh angry or frustrated, I do not want to be touched. Um, where what I need is to understand like why that happened. So I think you kind of spoke about this. For you, how do you deal with two separate personalities? I think it's kind of it's the opposite for you guys, but is it
Mhm.
opposite enough where you like physical contact and Darla likes to know? Is it how do you guys butt heads when you fight or are have arguments? Like how do you deal with two different personalities?
So that's a really interesting question. We don't fight a lot. It's actually pretty rare, and I think part of it is, um, for me, the way we act when we get upset is a little bit different. So for me, like I physical contact is like I just enjoy physical contact. Like I'm cool sitting hip to hip with Darla, or with the kids, or like I think part of the reason we're a wrestling family is because, um like my son likes it, my little daughter likes it. My middle daughter doesn't love wrestling as in competitively, but like, whatever. Um for me, if I get upset, so communication, sometimes if we're upset, like I write a lot. And I don't always give the stuff I write to Darla. Sometimes I write and then I'll look at it and I'll ask myself some questions about why I'm upset. And if it's like, is this going to matter in a day, a week, a month, a year? And if we kind of go from there. And if it's not going to matter, then I let a lot of stuff that aggravates me. Um, I ask myself, am I being, you know, kind of a wuss, right? So I let a lot of stuff go. Like if I'm like, and it doesn't happen super often, so it's not like I'm letting shit go all the time. It's like it's pretty rare. But for us, it's we just talk through a lot of stuff, and I believe I probably aggravate. Darla probably gets aggravated more than I do, because I probably do, like, I'm not as organized as Darla. So like she'll be like, "Hey, I need to do these things," and like I get to them, I just don't get to them in the time that she's always asking for. We had this conversation last night. Where she's like, "Hey, you said you're going to do these things. I'm going to do them." She's like, "You said you were going to do them a month ago." I was like, "It hasn't been a month." And then we looked at the time. I was like, "Oh, it has been a month." Um, so for us, it's uh, sometimes if we're having like a where we're just not connecting, like I like to journal, and then so I'll write a journal passage, I'll give it to her to read, and then she'll write me back, right? And then we'll kind of talk about it that way. Um, if Darla gets upset with me, um, sometimes the answer for her is to give her just a little bit of time, and then kind of go from there. And we'll either talk about it, or if it's something where we're not gonna like it's not a big deal, we're just both like unhappy about it. Sometimes we'll just let it go. Um, it really depends on kind of what's going on. Um, so for us, we don't really bicker, and unfortunate because of that. We journal when needed. We probably should do. We should, no, 100%, not probably. I believe I should do it more. I need to do a better job of that. Um, and then there are times where we just kind of let stuff go. And if it's a big deal, we'll come back to it. But we always ask ourselves, okay, like, is this a big deal or not? So, and that's talking on my behalf. She might have a completely different opinion where she's like, yeah, Brian's been a turd and he's to fix this stuff.
So you don't have that need when you're not understanding or you have a disagreement where you need that
I do
physical
need,
touch,
physical
where
touch.
you just need to be understood, it sounds like,
Yeah,
or be heard.
yeah. I mean, I like the physical touch. Like for me, it'll calm me down a little bit. Um, but I think that it's if we both have an understanding, it resolves faster. Um, the other thing for me personally, like if I'm, and this isn't just like in a relationship, but if I'm frustrated, like working out helps a lot. Um, just to kind of not crush it, but it kind of just works stuff out for me. So that could be as much as I personally don't enjoy running, but I do run, or it's lifting, anything like that, going for a walk. Sometimes when it's warmer, which ironically, there's snow on spring break here, as you well know, and there was no snow on winter break. And my kids pointed that out to me because they're on spring break this week. Um, too many
Yep.
ums. However, what we will do is we do like to walk and talk. So since we both work from home, like we'll try to schedule, like for us to walk around the block, I think it's 5 to 7 minutes. We'll try to schedule those, 5 to 7 minute walks like twice a day if we can. And it depends on our work schedules, obviously. So yeah, so I mean, I like the physical touch. I don't need it. I think the understanding is probably more important.
Okay.
So
I think that's something that we've been working through. I will give credit to Yin. She made the effort. She has kind of changed that mindset for her, where she doesn't need that physical touch as much. And I'll give credit to the courses she's been taking. Excuse me. In addition to her selling her product, there's been some classes that she's been taking, and she has some coworkers and friends that she has kind of put time with them and talk to them about certain things about how to improve relationships and how to talk to people. Where I think at the beginning, when we had Jace, and especially when we had Cammy, when there was a lot less time, where she she prompted the conversation, and I think there was I can kind of feel it in my chest. There was just constant, always a head-to-head battle. Like, I want to talk. I want to have a hug first. It's just like I can't do that, and I always think of myself as the one to not cater, but like talk or understand, and then I can learn and adapt. What there's always, if you live with someone long enough, they can kind of find every single kind of pressure point and just kind of hit all of them at once. And I just stopped thinking, and that moment is just a blob of just emotion that comes out. So things that I'm still working through, it's not where it needs to be, but she's made that effort. It always kind of comes back to uh, that Jocko stuff, just that extreme ownership, and
Hmm.
Ian's been learning that too, and always kind of throws it in my face whenever I say stuff is someone else's fault. So it's like, no, that's you. That's because of you. Like, you need to change that. It's like, yes, you're right. But I don't like to always say that she's right. I know in the back of my mind that she's right, but it's just whatever. You can't control anybody else or any how people think. You can only control what you do and what you change. And she's been a good reminder of that.
I think the other part and that this helped me, and I changed this like quite some time ago. When I always look for the best, right? In my children, I look for the best in my wife. Like and I tell people this all the time. I love my wife like heart and soul. Like she makes me better. She makes me happy just being with her. Like she's my person. Like I tell people, like she is my person. Like I cannot imagine a better partner. I cannot imagine like someone that just makes me smile. I mean, like this morning, she was up early. She made me coffee, not because she had to, just because she loves me. And she knew that we're doing this podcast. And I always look for the reasons that I love her. Like I can find reasons that she annoys me, right? She can 100% find reasons that I'm aggravating because I'm an aggravating fella. In the words of my son, he's like, Dad, you're an annoying fella sometimes. I'm like, I know where you get it. So for me, I'm always looking for opportunities to love her and to appreciate why she's as amazing as she is. And anything that is counter to that, I let go as quickly as possible. And there's times where we'll have conversations where like I just don't like the answer, and I make it an active point to let it go and take responsibility of okay, this makes me mad and it's my problem. So the extreme ownership book, like Jocko, I love his stuff. I own everything. Everything that happens in my life is my fault. So I think that's a really great way to do it. And the same thing with my children. I look for like opportunities, like how can I love them more? Like, and I've been hammering is the wrong word, but I've been consistently shaping and molding with big conversations all the time since my children were very little. Like we have them, my two older, we get an hour in the car each way. We have big conversations almost all the time to mold them so that we can be in a certain spot, and we have those reviews and conversations. And I'm always looking for opportunities to respect them and to be proud of them and to teach them. So I'm always looking for a positive interaction no matter where we're at. And I let a lot of the negative stuff go. And if I don't like something, I'm very, very vocal. Like, hey, like I don't really like that. And it's not that I'm upset. It's like I don't like this thing right here, and here are my feelings, and kind of go from there.
So that's what you would give to your wife, correct?
Hmm.
So this is what I don't like. This is how it happened,
Hmm.
and that's how you start the conversation. Okay.
I try.
Uh, I think when you were talking, it brought up ideas about what you want to talk about in another podcast, which is dating. I think I'm still trying to gather my thoughts and feelings about what that means and what it'll mean for my kids. I was just kind of overviewing what you were talking about. So you were saying like how your wife is your perfect partner and you love her and things like that. And you were getting to a point where I was seeing what you were saying or understanding what you were saying. You were saying, oh, you would write down all the great things about her or think about all the great things about her, and then you throw away all the stuff that you don't. I think at first it was kind of when you were talking about that, it was the kind of love at first sight. It's like she's your perfect partner, a soulmate, blah 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 blah. I think in terms of that dating piece that it reminded me of it, I think that's not realistic when you're trying to find somebody. I think the goal is to get to know each other and kind of mold each other into your soulmate is what
Correct.
my thoughts are in terms of that dating person. But the dating aspect, I've just thinking about it more and more, I don't particularly like it. Uh, and it kind of, it kind of, the kind of the shade in front of my eyes kind of was exposed when I was listening to Jordan Peterson about this topic and the topic about dating. It trains you to always have an out, and if you,
It does.
especially if you have multiple partners within your life. And I think that kind of is telling to the 50% of divorce rate. Um, you're indirectly training yourself to always have an out, especially with people that have kind of like a long-standing relationship or are engaged for like 10 years. Um, I think
Yeah.
it's you make a commitment and then you make it work. And there's always going to be problems with everyone. And you there has to be growing on both sides. And I don't want to be an extremist on this for my kids at all, but the more and more I think about it, there's going to be a certain way that I take care of it, and I don't want to alienate my kids either, and I don't want them to just go behind my back and start dating whoever. And I want them to be able to talk to me about that stuff. So there's probably going to be a medium there, but it just can't. It's like, oh, I found this person that is my soulmate, or the opposite of that. It's like I've been dating this girl for 2 weeks. I feel nothing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's that's how I kind of see that part. But coming back to what we've been talking about, I think that the journaling I think is a good idea. I think that kind of putting things to the side, I think just think about this more because we haven't done it really too much. It's thinking about what's going to be there tomorrow or next week or blah 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 blah. Is it going to be that important in that time? And I think that's a good tip for me and probably other people as well to just kind of get rid of probably that 80% of fights and disagreements and actually talk about what's actually useful. And I mean, a lot of that is probably going to come down to just talking about kids and stuff like that. How does that affect the kids and stuff like that?
I think a big part of that is, and part of the reason being a dad is easier, right? Like you always give your kids the benefit of a doubt, right? So your kid does something that you don't love, um, and you're going to give them the benefit of a doubt. Like, you know, they learn some sweet new vocabulary words. They use them correctly, but they don't know what they mean. So, and they don't use them with the right audience. So then all of a sudden you have, you know, whoever calling you like, hey, do you know what your son said? I don't because I'm not there. Okay, then that you have that conversation. You give them the benefit of a doubt. I think giving your spouse the benefit of a doubt versus, just expecting something. Again, I think you have to have expectations and you have to build a partnership and you have to build everything. It's always giving that person the benefit of a doubt. Like I make it a point to do that. And I think that's probably like, again, like I don't think I have a perfect relationship by any means, but I do wholeheartedly love my wife, right? If I have people that make me uncomfortable, like I definitely tell her. If when I introduce myself to other people, like I always let them know that I'm married. Like I think these are just small things that are important. I always introduce my wife right away. Um, but I mean, I'm always looking for the best. If she does something that I'm like, hey, like what? Then I'll just ask her about it. Or I say, sometimes I'm sensitive sometimes, and I'll be like, hey, I'm being sensitive and I know that, and we'll have that conversation. That doesn't happen very often, but I think it's the biggest thing you can do for your significant other is give them the benefit of doubt. You do it for your kids, right? Your kid has an accident when you're potty training them. You're like, okay, maybe that was too long of a car ride. So I think that's incredibly important is just believing in the best in that person and believing that they're, have your best interest and that you have theirs. And sometimes you'll run into situations where you get kicked in the teeth a little bit on that, where you're like, hey, let's talk about this. And then you do. And then you just got to be committed to being the best couple, being the best partner. I think it'd be really interesting. So I've been, married almost 9. You've been married 4. I think it'd be interesting to have this conversation again with a couple other people that have been married different. I think a newlywed couple that's been married a year would be actually kind of, I guess would be kind of hilarious. Like, it's kind of like what I'm thinking because like they're still in that like, no responsibilities. And I think being a husband and a boyfriend, like the responsibility level is like renting a car versus like owning a vintage like car for the long term where it's just so much more responsibility. Or for us getting people that have been married 20 years. Okay, what does 20 years look like? What does 25? Like my in-laws have been married over 50 years. uh and it's a different time now. Like, so how do we take some of their lessons and incorporate them into our marriages to be better husbands? And uh on the flip side, have a dad conversation with some of those dudes too, and be like, hey, you had 8 kids. What are the lessons that you want to share?
I think having a newlywed,
It'd be
I think
hilarious.
depends. Uh, or they would just be annoying. Like that's not the way it's gonna be. Uh, so it could either we could create like a bit short out of it, and that's just okay. I'm done talking to you. We're moving on.
Just like kick them out of the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, and that could be our short for an episode of behind the scenes or something like that. Or I definitely think 20 year person that's been married would I don't know if it would be interesting, but probably would be interesting because that's what we would want to know about. Because I'm looking for tips. I'm looking for things that are going to make my life easier and make my marriage uh,
Stronger.
better, stronger. So I think you said it right. I mean, to tie it back, a lot of the lessons that we're kind of preaching about or still learning about as a being a good dad, really they're all just relationship tips, but
Pretty much.
they all need to be shifted in a little way because we're we're talking down to people because I mean we're their parents. I mean soon we'll have to morph those when they get to be like 20 and 21 and stuff like that. But obviously we're going to still be their parents, but
Correct.
all of these kind of lessons that we've been preaching about, they just need to be morphed into an equal conversation, right? And uh sure we say different words and they're just bigger words and stuff like that, but in the end we just want that same kind of relationship. Sure there's different things that we take from different relationships. Obviously we have this like friendly and grown up conversation with our kids, whereas with our partner we want that love. We want that connection. So I mean there's still similar core things that we want from both relationships. So I think if people were going to listen to this podcast and say, "Oh, why is this a dad podcast?" I would say it all comes down to the same kind of core tips that we've been talking about. Be present, have those big conversations like you always say, and just always try to improve.
I would agree. I think the dad part of this conversation that is also incredibly important that should not be glossed over. I think in order to be a great dad, you need a great parenting partner. And I think that is taken for granted. I am incredibly fortunate, and I don't know if it's, I don't want to call it luck, because I made the choices I made for reasons. Um, my wife is a fantastic mother, and we do great as a team. Like, not only is she good to like our daughter, she's good to, her stepkids, also all of our kids get treated equal. Like, she's a great parent, she's a great influence for the girls. Like, she's an amazing woman. That being said, my ex-wife is also a great mother, like, and she's an amazing woman as well. Not as in like, like we weren't great partners, and that's okay, but we are all in alignment on where our kids need to go for the most part. I mean, like, I consider alignment like you're 80% aligned, right? Because you're never going to be 100%. So I think that's definitely incredibly important. So if you want to be a great dad, and I don't want to be a good dad, I want to be a great dad. I think that you have to have a great parenting partner. So, like, when we kind of get into the dating conversation, which again, I think is going to be really interesting when you pick that partner to have kids with. And I think you have to choose to have kids. And I think when you accidentally have kids, that's okay. But I think that that does really complicate things, because you're not always getting to choose that best parenting partner. Um, and that can cost you a lot. So I think that today's conversation is, which is harder, being a good parent or being a good spouse. I think being a good spouse is harder for a lot of different reasons. And I think part of what makes it hard is, in order to be a good parent, you have to be a good spouse so that you have a good partnership. So I think that's kind of how I would close it out, is this is as a dad podcast. If you want to be a great dad, and you can do it by yourself, but if you want to streamline the process, and lack of a better term, make it easier in order to be a great dad, you need to have a great parenting partner, which hopefully should be your spouse, because then you're a better team. So that's kind of
Yeah,
how I look at it.
yeah, I agree. I think keep it simple and short. Basically, what I'm hearing you say, and I agree, to be a good dad, you need to be a good husband. So it goes hand in hand. So to be a good husband, after you can accomplish that, and it's a feat. Uh,
Every day.
well, yeah, I mean, when you're a good husband, then you should be having a good partnership, and then when you have that good partnership, that should be trickling down to your kids. So
Correct.
you also get to teach them those lessons about how to treat each other in a relationship, and they can obviously see that.
I agree. All right, so this was an interesting one. I think we probably close it there. My kids are watching these now. Like, they found our
Okay.
YouTube channel, so they have, and my wife is one of our subscribers, and I'm confident she'll watch this one, or bits and pieces of it minimally. Uh,
Good.
so I think it'll be interesting. So I think we kind of close it out. Hopefully, I do know that we're looking to kind of expand out, add some other dads, get some other opinions. So if anybody like does want to be part of it and you want to reach out to us, I'm definitely open to having people reach out, have some conversations, and just see wherever the dad podcast goes. I want to be a better dad, and I'm not saying my way is the best way. It's just the best way that I found for me and my kids. And I'm definitely willing to learn some more. So hopefully we'll have our guest on next week, and he can tell us about his dadding experience.
I'm sure that's going to be interesting. And then he can tell us why he had to fly out to California. I'm sure he's happy about that.
Yeah, nothing like being on a plane overnight. All right. Anything else you kind of want to add, or are we gonna good to
No,
wrap
we're
up for
good.
this
Yeah.
episode? All right, excellent. I appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See ya.
All right.